Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc was questioned at a parliamentary committee today about how two suspects of a foiled terror plot in Toronto were able to get into Canada. LeBlanc and several senior security officials testifying, trying to defend the immigration and security screening process. LeBlanc said the two men facing terrorism charges have been in Canada for years. One secured citizenship just a few months before his arrest.
The security services, CBSA, CSIS, and the Immigration Department did all of the existing security checks and the normal security checks, and including biometrics by the RCMP on a number of occasions. And there was, at the time that those decisions were made, no information that would have come to light to trigger what happened earlier this spring in terms of CSIS's investigation.
All right, let's bring in Neil Bisson. He is a former intelligence officer at CSIS, joins us now to talk some more about this. Neil, we heard the minister talk about the regular or routine checks that would be done ahead of somebody being allowed to first come to Canada and then secure citizenship. Can you run us through some of those? What does that screening process look like?
Well, essentially, when an individual applies to come to Canada, whether they're an asylum seeker, they're seeking a visitor visa, or some sort of status in Canada, they will provide an application with as much detailed information as the Government of Canada can acquire in order to make a decision on whether or not they should be admissible to the country. And then further, whether or not they should be given the opportunity to have any sort of status within Canada. So once all the checks are done, the decision is then made whether or not this individual may or may not pose a potential threat, whether it be criminal, national security, or otherwise. And then once that's been conducted, if the checks indicate that there are issues, then further investigations are conducted. And if not, the individual will more than likely be granted whatever status they're looking for.
When you mentioned that for some reasons they would not qualify to either come to Canada or have status in Canada, can you give me an example of some of those reasons? I guess a criminal record in another country could be one.
Mm-hmm. Another possibility would be an individual who is a representative of a terrorist organization or has been involved in criminal or terrorist-related activity. It could be individuals that are applying from countries that Canada feels may present some sort of an espionage or other national security threat.
Now, in this case, there seemed to be a video that was available, I guess, on the dark web that had some connection to the father. And I'm wondering whether the dark web would be searched by either the RCMP or intelligence officials as part of a screening process.
It's very difficult to deal with these types of situations because when an individual provides information for any sort of an application, they're going to present themselves in the best light possible. And more than likely, if they are involved in some, for example, terrorist-related activity, they are not going to potentially provide any information in relationship to that action or even provide their full name. If they're coming from a country that there's been a lot of internal conflict or that there has been conflict in, it may be very difficult for the government departments that do this type of security screening, even to verify who they are and who they represent.
Is there any indication here that the ball was dropped?
I don't think so. I think what is happening here is that we're seeing a shift dynamically throughout the globe, is that there are a lot more individuals who are seeking access to Canada. And unfortunately, a lot of these individuals are coming from areas of the world where there are conflict. And what the Government of Canada is doing is making sure that those individuals who are trying to access Canada are being scrutinized as much as possible before they enter. And then even after they enter, once they apply for any other status within Canada, that those checks are being done. The unfortunate thing is there's just such a sheer number of individuals who are trying to enter Canada that once in a while, someone who hasn't represented themselves honestly, that information may not necessarily come to the attention of the National Security Organization or the Canadian intelligence community.
Do we sort of look at an application thinking that the person is honest, and maybe do we need to look at it with a more critical mind, thinking the person is dishonest and prove that they are?
Traditionally, when individuals provide information, it is up to the Canadian intelligence community and the other national security partners to try to discern whether or not the information being provided is legitimate or not. When you're coming from a place of conflict, it can be very difficult to verify any information because you have people that are fleeing from essentially what we'd consider wreckage. They have no records, they have no documentation, and there's no way of acquiring that. So it makes it very difficult. Now, whether or not Canada needs to look at this from the perspective of, well, anyone who's coming from an area of conflict might necessarily be a national security threat, I don't think so. But I think what needs to happen is that more resources and more effort needs to be put into the amount of scrutiny that's being put upon anyone that's entering Canada.
Got it. Neil Bisson, agree. Thank you very much for joining us. It was good to have you on the show.
Thank you.